Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Cell. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the daily edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 31st October 2022, and the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start the discussion now. This article on page number 10 discusses in detail the national security strategy that has been released by the United States of America and its president. Now, this national security strategy of the United States of America has implications not only for the security issues or security challenges faced by the United States of America, but it also has implications and holds value for the global geopolitics. This is because we understand that United States of America is one of the important, or you can say one of the most important players in the global geopolitics. And that is why this national security strategy that has been released by the United States of America is very, very important. In this context, this national security strategy of the United States of America focuses on the domestic threats that are faced by the US. At the same time, it also focuses on various transnational threats, conventional threats, the rise of China as a strategic country in the Indo-Pacific, and as well as the threats posed by China and its rising assertion. And all these issues, the rise of China as well as focus on non-traditional security threats, has implications on India. And that is why we also need to understand what are the implications of this national security strategy that has been released by the United States of America on India. In this regard, in the larger context of the India-US relations, it is important for us to understand the key pillars of the national security strategy of the United States of America, and at the same time, it is also important for us to understand what are its implications for India. So if you look at the United States of America's national security strategy, it's a document which reflects the US government's approach of handling the national security challenges which are faced by the United States of America. And that is why it aims at handling the domestic, transnational, conventional as well as non-conventional security threats. In this regard, there are certain domestic threats that are faced by the United States of America, and it aims at handling them. Secondly, as far as the transnational threats are concerned, we are aware that United States of America is one of the important countries and is integrated in all the multilateral platforms. And that is why the US and its role on these platforms and the issues of global importance is very, very important. As far as the conventional security threats are concerned, it focuses on the rise of China and the issue that is being faced in the Europe because of the Russia-Ukraine war and the disruption that Russia has created in the global supply chains as well as energy order. Besides the conventional security threats, it also focuses on the non-conventional security threats which are posed by climate change, the rising oil prices, rising inflation, and food security related issues at a global level. And that is why this strategy aims or seeks to sustain the US's global leadership. We are aware that since the fall of the USSR in 1990s, US is considered as the only superpower in the world. Now this superpower status or the hegemony of United States of America is being challenged by the rise of China. And that is why this national security strategy of the US aims at sustaining the US's global leadership. Further, US has been facing issues related to economy, that is high inflation, rise in oil prices and commodity prices, and that is why this strategy also aims at improving the US's economy. Now this is very important because the US's economic status also breeds its status as a superpower globally, and that is why the US also needs to focus on its economy. Further, US aims at building a vast network of alliances as well as partnerships. We are aware that it has been forging alliances in the Indo-Pacific region in the form of Quad, AUKUS as well as I2U2 in the West Asia. Further, this strategy aims at countering China as its strategic competitor and Russia as a disruptor. Now, we are aware that Russia is not as big a power as China. However, it has created a disruption in the Europe and its economy and its geopolitics because of this Russia-Ukraine war. However, the country with which the United States of America is most concerned is the China, because it is challenging the US supremacy at all levels, including economic, technology, as well as defense and security in the Indo-Pacific region. And at the same time, the US aims at boosting the US's competitiveness as well as defending its democracy. Besides these threats, it also aims at handling the issues related to climate change, food insecurity, pandemics, terrorism, energy shortages, and inflation, which are sometimes considered as non-traditional security threats. And that is why the US seeks to invest in the tools of American power and influence by strengthening the economy at home, improving critical infrastructure, investing in technologies such as microchips and semiconductors. And the most important outcome of this national security strategy is that the strategy clearly considers China as its strategic competitor, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. And this is very, very crucial for India also, because we also see China as one of the biggest threats in India's neighborhood. And that is why we are also aligning with like-minded countries in our region like the US, Japan, Australia in the form of Quad. Plus, also we are also aligned with like-minded countries in the West Asia like UAE, Israel, along with the United States of America. So that is why this focus of the national security strategy on countering the China and considering China as a strategic competitor is crucial also for India and has implications for India also. In this regard, let us look at what are the implications of this strategy for India. In this regard, this national security strategy considers India as one of the important partners of the United States of America in handling the global issues. And that is why this national security strategy hints at India's possible integration in important global forums such as the G7 grouping. Further, the NSS identifies India as both a bilateral as well as multilateral partner in the Indo-Pacific, especially in the context of countering the Chinese aggressiveness and assertion in the Indo-Pacific region. Further, it recognizes India's status as the largest democracy and as a major defense partner. Plus, both have been collaborating on various platforms of regional importance like the Quad as well as I2U2. So this is how the national security strategy of the United States of America focuses on issues of global importance which are also crucial for India's interests. And that is why this national security strategy has implications for geopolitics as well as for India and its role in the global geopolitics. In this context, if you want to learn more about India and the US relations, you can go through the DNS of 1st October 2022, where India-US relations have been dealt with in quite a detail. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 10 is related to a controversy that has started in the state of Kerala between the governor and the ministers of the Council of Ministers of State Government of Kerala. Now, this controversy is associated with the power of removing a minister from the Council of the Ministers. In this line, the governor of Kerala has asserted that the governor has the power to remove any minister if that minister is bringing down the dignity of the office of the governor, because governor is the constitutional head of the state. However, there is no past precedent under which the governor has removed a minister on such lines. And if you normally look at the procedure of removal of a minister from the Council of the Ministers, it is the Chief Minister who advises the governor to remove a minister from the Council of the Ministers. And the governor does not have the power of removing a minister on his own or suo motu. So in this context, let us try and understand this controversy and understand the various issues associated with the powers of the governor and how this controversy has started in the state of Kerala. In this regard, this issue is particularly in news related to the governor's position because Kerala's governor has threatened that he can independently dismiss the ministers. And the governor has claimed that the ministers are appointed on the pleasure of the governor, and that is why the governor has the power of removing any minister in the state of Kerala. Now, there is no precedent in which the governor has removed an individual minister without consulting the chief minister of the state, because that has been the constitutional practice where if a minister has to be removed, the chief minister of the state recommends the removal of that particular minister. In this regard, we need to understand this issue in detail, which can be important for us from General Studies Paper 2 point of view. In this regard, in the state of Kerala, the governor of Kerala has threatened that he can independently dismiss the ministers. So this is one issue that has come up in the news which has brought into light the functioning of the office of governor. In this case of Kerala, the governor has claimed that the statements of the individual ministers that lower the dignity of the governor's office can invite action including the withdrawal of pleasure, which means the governor can dismiss the ministers. That is what the governor is claiming, because governor is the constitutional head of the states. And that is why in this case, the governor is claiming that if the statements given by the ministers lower the dignity of the office of the governor, because the governor is the head of the state, the governor can remove or withdraw the pleasure on the basis of which the ministers are appointed, or at least the constitutional provision says so. So let us first understand what exactly is the issue here. And then we will try to understand the various provisions related to governor which are applicable in this particular case. Now, the issue here is that the governor of the state of Kerala is not granting assent to the Kerala University Laws Amendments Bill. In this regard, the governor is exercising pocket veto and is not taking any decision on the bill. And this has been opposed by the Education Minister of Kerala. Now, normally we are aware that in case of passage of any bill and for it to become an act, the assent of the governor is required. And in this case, the Kerala State Legislative Assembly has sent this bill related to Kerala University laws for the assent to the governor. However, the governor is not taking any decision on this particular bill. Now, normally, if the governor does not want to give assent to this bill, he can return this bill again to the Legislative Assembly for its reconsideration. However, the governor is not doing so. Now, the Constitution does not define the time frame in which the governor has to return the bill for reconsideration. And that is why this is termed as pocket veto. That is, governor can sit on that bill for a very long period of time. And that is why the Education Minister of Kerala is opposing this particular move of the governor of not exercising any kind of action on this bill which has been forwarded to the governor for his assent. And this is a situation which is called as pocket veto. Another issue here is that the governor is the chancellor of the universities in the state. Now, because this particular bill which is under controversy is related to the universities, and that is why this confrontation is being witnessed in the case of state of Kerala, where the governor is not providing assent to this Kerala University law. However, it needs to be understood that the office of chancellor is created by statutes or laws which establish the university. And that is why the legislature of the state are equally competent to curtail the powers of the chancellors or even abolish the system of having the governor as a chancellor. So this clearly highlights that the state legislative assemblies have primacy over the governor as far as the office of chancellor is concerned, because normally the governor is the chancellor of the university. In this backdrop, the Panchi Commission, which was created to understand or recommend on the center-state relations or review the working of the center-state relations, the Panchi Commission had recommended that the governor should not be burdened with the role of chancellors of the university. So this is the issue that is presently going on in the state of Kerala. Now, in this context, the issue here is that the governor of Kerala has threatened the Minister of Education that he can remove the Minister of Education on his own. And that is one of the important controversy that has started, because there is no past precedent where a governor has removed any individual minister without the chief minister providing advice for the removal of that particular minister. So that is why it's a unique situation that has come up in the case of state of Kerala. Now, to understand what are the provisions related to the appointment of the chief minister and the council of the ministers and the removal of the council of ministers, we need to understand certain articles in the Indian constitution. And that is why it is important for us to understand the relationship that exists between the council of minister and the governor. In this line, there are two articles, Article 163 and 164, which clearly define the relationship between the council of minister and the governor. In Article 163, it states that there shall be a council of ministers with chief minister as the head to aid and advise the governor on the exercise of his function, except insofar as he is required to exercise his functions or any of them in his discretion. That is, normally the council of the minister, which is headed by the chief minister, will aid and advise the governor in the exercise of the functions that are provided to the governor. And there are certain situations where the governor has to act on his own or under his own discretion. That has also been clearly defined in the constitution. Now, regarding the appointment of the ministers and the chief minister, the Article 164 states that the chief minister shall be appointed by the governor and other ministers shall be appointed by the governor on the advice of the chief minister. Now, this is a conventional practice in case of parliamentary democracy, where the head of the state appoints the prime minister or the chief minister, and on the basis of the advice of the prime minister and the chief minister, the ministers are then appointed. Further, it has been provided in the Article 164 that the ministers shall hold the office during the pleasure of the governor. And this is the clause which has been invoked by the governor of Kerala, that since the ministers hold the office during the pleasure of the governor can also remove this pleasure or can also withdraw this pleasure, thereby terminating the minister. And further, the council of the ministers shall be collectively responsible to the legislative assembly of the state. In this regard, we also need to understand the way in which the council of ministers function and why there is primacy of the chief minister amongst the council of ministers. And that will help us understand how a particular minister can be removed and why this argument of the governor of the state of Kerala is not valid on the basis of constitutional precedents. Now, after understanding the Article 163 and 164 of the Indian Constitution, which deal with the manner of appointment and removal of the ministers, we should understand what is the essence of this pleasure doctrine under which various ministers of the state government are appointed. And we have just learned that the ministers hold the office during the pleasure of the governor. Now, this does not simply mean that the governor has the power of removing any minister at his own will. It is the chief minister of the state who will advise the removal of any particular minister from the council of the ministers to the governor, and only then the governor can remove that particular person from the council of the ministers. In this line, the constitutional expert Subhash Kashyap has clearly discussed and highlighted the implications of the pleasure doctrine that has been provided in the case of appointment of the ministers. And according to Subhash Kashyap, the word during the pleasure of the governor was always understood to mean that the pleasure should not continue when the ministry has lost the confidence of the majority, which simply means that the appointment of the ministers under the pleasure of the governor will not hold true when the council of the minister has lost the majority. So look at a scenario when a council of ministers has lost the majority in the state legislative assembly. And if during that time the governor wants that this ministry should still hold the office because the governor has provided its pleasure for these ministers to hold the position, this will not stand true. And the moment this ministry loses the confidence of the majority, that is, it loses the majority in the state legislative assembly, the governor would use his pleasure in dismissing the council of ministers. Therefore, the article implies that the governor is only a titular head of the state. And if the cabinet has the majority, the governor cannot act against the cabinet. In this case, in the state of Kerala, the council of the ministers has majority, and that is why the governor cannot misuse this pleasure doctrine to remove any minister at his own will. Now, in this regard, the governor appoints only those persons as ministers who are recommended by the chief minister of the state. In this regard, the chief minister can ask a minister to resign or advise the governor to dismiss him in case of difference of opinion. Further, the CM presides over the meeting of the council of the ministers and influences its decisions. Also, the chief minister guides, directs, as well as controls and coordinates the activities of all the ministers. So this is clearly highlighting that chief minister is the one who is all powerful in case of the council of the ministers. And if any minister does not obey the directions given by the chief minister, he can be removed on the basis of chief minister advising the governor to dismiss that particular minister. And the governor has to do that. Further, another way in which the ministers can be removed is when the council of the minister itself is collapsed. That is, the chief minister can bring about the collapse of the council of the ministers by resigning from his office. Because the chief minister is the head of the council of the minister, his resignation or death automatically dissolves the council of the minister. And these provisions clearly highlight that the chief minister is the head of the council of the minister, and that is why he is the one who decides who will become a minister and who has to be removed from the post of the minister, and not the governor. In this context, the position of the governor is only constitutional in nature, is only symbolic in nature, because it is the chief minister who will decide who will become the minister and who has to be removed from the ministry. And that is why the chief minister advises the governor to remove a particular minister. And that is why this issue which is happening in case of Kerala is a problematic issue. However, in this case, we are understanding that the governor is saying that the statements given by the minister are lowering the dignity of the office of the governor. However, there is no such thing that has been given in the constitution on which a governor can take action. In this regard, the governor can remove the council of the ministers and impose president's rule under Article 356 under only certain conditions. And this condition is called as failure of constitutional machinery. However, the constitution does not define what exactly is meant by this failure of constitutional machinery. In this line, two articles have been provided in the constitution, Article 355, which imposes a duty on the center to ensure that the government of every state is carried on in accordance with the provisions of the constitution. And Article 356 further empowers the president to issue a proclamation if he is satisfied that a situation has arisen in which the government of the state cannot be carried out in accordance with the provision of the constitution. In this case, the president can act either on a report of the governor of the state or otherwise, that is even without the governor's report. So this simply means that the power that the governor has is that the governor can recommend to the president to impose president's rule under Article 356. And that is only going to happen when the president has ascertained that the state government is not functioning in accordance with the provisions of the constitution and a situation is created where there is failure of constitutional machinery. So that is the situation where the governor can take such action. However, there is no clause which provides that the governor can individually remove the minister without chief minister advising the removal of that particular minister. So that is the issue that we need to understand here clearly. In this line, Supreme Court in one of its famous verdict, that is the S.R. Bommai case 1994, highlighted the cases of proper and improper imposition of President's rule or use of Article 356 to remove the state governments. Now, what are these situations where the imposition of President rule would be proper? Let us look at these situations. First situation is where after the general elections to the assembly, no party secures a majority and there is a hung assembly. And a coalition is also not being formed, and that is why this is a case of hung assembly, and in that particular scenario the president's rule can be imposed and it would be a proper case of imposition of president's rule. Secondly, where the party having a majority in the assembly declines to form a ministry and the governor cannot find a coalition ministry commanding a majority in the assembly. So the majority party has resigned and no coalition is being formed which can form the government or which can pass the floor test of confidence. Further, when a ministry resigns after its defeat in the assembly and no other party is willing or able to form a ministry commanding a majority in the assembly. Further, where a constitutional direction of the central government is disregarded by the state government. So this is a situation of failure of constitutional machinery where the state governments are not following the directions provided by the central government. Also, in case of internal subversion, where a government is deliberately acting against the constitution and the law, and this is a situation which can be considered as failure of constitutional machinery. And also physical breakdown where the government willfully refuses to discharge its constitutional obligations, endangering the security of the state. So these are some cases of proper application of president's rule in a state. However, Supreme Court has also identified improper cases of imposition of the president's rule or usage of Article 356. Let us look at them also. In this case, the imposition of the president's rule in a state would be improper under following situations. The first is when a ministry resigns or is dismissed on losing the majority support in the assembly. So if a floor test has been conducted in the assembly and the ministry is not able to find majority support. In that case, if a governor recommends the imposition of president's rule without probing the possibility of forming an alternative ministry, can be considered as an improper case of imposition of the governor's rule. Another case of improper imposition of the president's rule is when the governor recommends the imposition of president's rule without allowing the ministry to prove its majority on the floor of the assembly. Further, when the ruling party enjoying majority support in the assembly has suffered a massive defeat in the general elections. So this will also be a case of improper imposition of president's rule. Also, internal disturbances which are not amounting to internal subversion or physical breakdown. Also, the cases in which the maladministration in the state or allegations of corruption against any ministry or any stringent financial exigencies of the state are there. This is also not a situation where the president's rule can be imposed. So in this case, we are witnessing that there is a confrontation between the governor and the Minister of Education in case of Kerala, where the governor is not providing assent and the statements given by the minister are being seen as lowering the dignity of the office of the governor. However, this is not a case in which the constitutional machinery is not functioning properly, or it is not a case in which the president's rule can be imposed. So here two things come out very clearly. First is that a minister can only be removed if the chief minister decides and advises the governor to remove that particular minister. Second is that if the governor feels that the government of the state is not functioning in accordance with the provisions of the constitution and there is a failure of constitutional machinery, that is also a case when the government of the state can be dismissed and president's rule can be imposed. And that too will happen on the basis of the report which the governor will send to the president, and then president will recommend the imposition of president's rule in that particular state. So that is why it is clear that there is no precedent where the governor on his own can remove any individual minister without the advice of chief minister. And this sets a wrong precedent in case of the functioning of the office of governor, which has not happened in the past 75 years of functioning of parliamentary democracy in case of India. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 1 is related to the DNA testing technology, which is a scientific technology that is being used to gather evidence in various criminal as well as civil cases across India. In this line, the demand for these DNA tests is increasing. However, there are concerns associated with genetic data privacy, which are seen as sometimes being infringement of the right to privacy of the individuals, as well as being against the Article 20 of the Indian Constitution, which stands against compelling anyone to become a witness against himself or herself. Now, in this line, Supreme Court recently had set aside a decision of the High Court, and this decision had allowed the DNA testing to determine paternity of two children to verify a claim that was made by their mother. In this, the Supreme Court said that just because DNA testing was allowed or the DNA testing was possible under law, it should not be conducted merely because it is mentioned in the law, and it should be seen or tested against the right to privacy of the individuals upon which such tests are being conducted. So in this line, if you look at this issue, there are two important issues that come to light. First is genetic data versus the right to privacy. And secondly, what is the status of genetic data privacy in India? What are the various judgments? What are the provisions under the Indian Constitution? That is, can a person or conduction of such scientific test on a person be seen as a person becoming a witness against himself? Because this has been protected in the Indian Constitution that the person cannot be compelled or provides protection from self-incrimination. That is, a person cannot be compelled to become a witness against himself. So first, let us look at the issue of genetic data versus the right to privacy. Now in this line, the genetic data privacy simply seeks to prevent a third party or anyone else from using a person's genetic data without his or her permission. In this line, we are aware that the science and technology has made advancement, and it is possible to obtain DNA samples from people and extract their personal information from these people. However, these advances are sometimes seen to be in violation of a person's right to privacy. Now, this is primarily because genetic data is very crucial in understanding various aspects of the individual. And such genetic data is seen as a blueprint of a person's physical as well as biological characteristics. And if anyone has access to the person's gene sequence, that person can learn about the other person's personal life. Now in this line, a person's genetic data can reveal various aspects of a person's biological characteristics. In this line, this data can be used to understand a person's predisposition for alcoholism, depression, aggressiveness, various diseases, as well as a person's tendency to commit a crime. Now, normally a person would not reveal such details to anybody else. And if the other person has access to the genetic data of that person, it can be used to understand the other person in quite a detail, which can be seen as infringing the right to privacy of the individual. And that is why it is said that a person's genes are the blueprint of his or her physical and biological characteristics. And that is why data privacy is critical. Also, it is relatively simple to sequence some DNA today in order to perpetuate discrimination also. So then what is the status of genetic privacy in India? In this line, the genetic discrimination is seen as a breach of Article 14, which guarantees that everyone is treated fairly and equally under the law. Further, Supreme Court in the famous Puttaswamy judgment has highlighted that right to privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21. And since everyone's genome is a private matter, that is, the genetic data of a person is a private matter, and as such, genetic discrimination must be placed under the privacy umbrella, which has been provided as a fundamental right under the Article 21 after the Puttaswamy judgment of the Supreme Court of India. Further, if you look at the global practices, genetic discrimination is illegal in almost all the countries. Now, scientific tests are generally being conducted these days to resolve various criminal as well as civil cases. In this line, various tests like narco-analysis, polygraphic examination, all these are conducted to gather evidences in various criminal situations. However, are these scientific test results self-incriminating in nature? That is, are these tests being conducted in such a manner that the person is becoming a witness against himself? Because protection has been provided in the Indian Constitution against self-incrimination. So it has been highlighted that the scientific tests infringe the protection guaranteed by the Constitution, and the result of the tests are also not entirely reliable. In this line, various tests like polygraphic tests or the narcoanalysis, even the collection of genetic data in this particular case can be seen as against Article 20, which provides protection from self-incrimination. That is, a person cannot be compelled to become a witness against himself or herself. Further, it is also sometimes seen as infringement of the Article 21, that is right to life and personal liberty and right to mental privacy. So what are the issues involved in such a scenario? So issue is that whether involuntary administration of the scientific techniques comes under the ambit of self-incrimination violating Article 23 or not, this has to be tested. Further, whether the results taken from such tests will be considered as compelled testimony under the Article 23, that is this an act of self-incrimination? That is, a person is being compelled to become a witness against himself or herself. Third question that comes up is whether the involuntary administration of these tests violate the right to life as it invades mental privacy. And last question is that whether such test subjects a person to cruel or inhuman behavior. That is why this issue of genetic data privacy is becoming crucial, and the debate is regarding these questions that we see here. So in the conclusion, it can be said that as the genetic research advances, genetic testing can be performed on small tissues in our bodies also. And this has heightened the urgency of the situation, and it can be abused by various insurance companies, employers, as well as third parties. And genetic information is distinct from other forms of personal data, and accordingly, it requires special attention. So this is about genetic data and how it stands against the right to privacy as well as Article 21, which provides for right to life, and what are the issues, or can it be considered as a case of self-incrimination against which the right has been provided in the Fundamental Right Article 23. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article in the text and the context section on page number 12 is related to anti-superstition laws in India. Now, the debate regarding the anti-superstition laws in India has come into light in the backdrop of brutal murders of two women as part of ritualistic human sacrifices in one of the districts of Kerala. And these murders have brought to light the prevalence of superstitious beliefs, black magic, as well as sorcery in Kerala. And this calls for us to understand the extent of such crimes in India first, then look at the laws that are dealing with such incidents in India, that if there is a all India law related to such superstitious acts, which are the states which have created their acts related to anti-superstition, and also what are the issues associated with the anti-superstition laws that exist in India. And lastly, we'll look at some of the suggestions which are required to handle such brutal issues that are happening in some of the states in India. So if you look at the extent of superstition-related crimes in India, according to a 2021 report of the National Crimes Record Bureau, 6 deaths were linked to human sacrifices. Secondly, witchcraft was the motive for 68 killings across India. And the maximum number of such witchcraft cases were reported from states like Chhattisgarh, followed by Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, as well as Kerala, which saw 2 cases of human sacrifice. In 2020, India saw 88 deaths due to witchcraft, and 11 died as a part of human sacrifices, according to the NCRB report data. Now, if you look at the laws which deal with such incidents in India, there is no central law that exclusively deals with crimes related to witchcraft, superstition, or occult-inspired activities. And only a few states have enacted laws to counter the witchcraft and protect women from deadly witch hunting. In this, some of the states like Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, they have come up with a law against such kind of witchcraft-related crimes. However, these laws themselves are also very weak in handling these issues. So in this context, let us look at what are the issues that are involved in such kinds of crimes and to what extent we need to curb these issues associated with superstition, etc. in India. If you look at the cases of witch hunting and human sacrifices, these are part of systems of oppression that have been culturally and religiously legitimized for centuries, because these practices have been traditionally transferred through generations in some of the parts of the India. Further, witch hunting and superstition related crimes violate the basic fundamental rights guaranteed under the Article 14, 15 and 21 of the Indian Constitution. Further, such acts are also in violation of several provisions of various international legislations to which India is a signatory. For example, all such acts or acts of crime stand in contravention to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948, of which India is a signatory. Further, there are loopholes in the Indian Penal Code also. If you look at the Indian Penal Code, it only takes into cognizance human sacrifice only after a murder has been committed. Further, there are issues of legal loopholes. In this line, if you look at the Indian Penal Code, it only takes into cognizance human sacrifices once a murder is committed. That is, when the murder has not been committed and if a woman has been tortured on the basis of witchcraft physically, it is not considered as human sacrifice practice and it is considered as a case of simple hurting or physical torture. Further, the accompanying mental trauma is also not accounted for under any of the laws in India. And the most important issue here is that there is no central law that deals specifically with these practices, and even when the state laws exist, they are also inadequate because many of them have light punishments. And also, there are issues of non implementation of the laws on the ground, which leads to low conviction rates at times. So, this brings us to what needs to be done to handle this situation effectively. So, there is a need for central law which must be designed and it must take into account the reasons for the failure of implementation of the state laws. Further, the Prevention of Witch Hunting Bill 2016 still remains pending in the Parliament. Also, steps must be taken to ensure adequate housing and shelter facilities for the victims, as lack of these remain one of the core reasons for such crimes. Also, employment avenues must be provided to women to ensure their independence so that they do not fall victim to such witchcraft practices in some parts of India. And at the same time, comprehensive victim compensation schemes as directed by Calcutta High Court must be incorporated. In conclusion, the focus for handling such crimes has to be victim centric. That is, victims or the challenges faced by the victim should be taken into account first. At the same time, there is also need to understand the social narrative which provides legitimacy to such crimes related to superstition. And that is why there is a need for understanding the narrative within which the superstition crimes occur in India, and that is very crucial for formulation of a central law which will be helpful in curbing such crimes, which has been brought to light by two murders in Kerala.